Yes? All good. Well, it's an amazing honor to be here. I have to tell you, I started teaching right out of university. Kind of feel somewhat related to the beginnings of Australia. I taught in a prison school on an island. Taught in this prison school, and I think it's probably similar. I taught oceanography and algebra. And this school had a rigorous admission process through our court system, similar to the original settlers here. And I lived in the dorm, and I told my students that I'd offer them extra help whenever they wanted. I had every meal with them. I lived down the hall. They could get to me. And I didn't get any requests. I taught 2 classes. I taught algebra and oceanography. No requests in algebra, 0. But I got a lot of requests in oceanography. They couldn't get enough. And I tried to sort this out. And then I realized it was only 2 units in oceanography that really had their interest. It was tides and currents and hypothermia. And that was the escape unit for an island reform school. And so I learned early in my career, if people are desperate for my knowledge, if you want to escape, and I have the escape route, you will pay attention. And you will even do what I say. If you're not so desperate to escape and you think everything's fine, then I'm not such a great teacher. So my quality depends on your desperate nature. And you don't look desperate. You look just fine. So I'm a little worried about my quality this morning. Maybe I can share some desperation with you. I have 2 children. The United States is not doing as well as Australia. And my personal goal is to have them move out of my house permanently. I want them out. They're 22 and 24, and they are complacent to be where they are. And any ideas, if you can talk to me after this talk, I'm desperate. I will listen to you if you have ideas about getting rid of adult children. Just please don't hesitate. And I'll be around for dinner tonight. Please come over and see me. Help me out. And I have to tell you, I do a lot of consulting around the world. And sometimes for corporations, not just for schools. I get this weird life. I meet all kinds of groups, and most of my work is trying to teach people critical thinking on the internet, which is a whole other thing. And so one day I was interviewing the CEO of HSBC, London headquarters. Do you know HSBC here? It's a big bank, and biggest bank in the world. And you might think about this. If I were to ask you, what's the most important skill? In an age where the internet connects everything together, where we have more and more complicated problems, not simpler, but complicated. Climate change, really complicated. And investment strategies. What's the one skill that separates top talent from people who are just smart with high test scores? What's the really, really important skill? You might just think about that for a moment. And so I asked this guy, what is that skill? And I've asked a couple people outside of education, and I get the same answer: empathy. And I wasn't expecting empathy. I was expecting critical thinking or collaboration, but I got empathy. And I asked him, what does that mean? What's empathy? And he said, well, in the global economy, it's critical that we have talented people who understand other people's points of view. Not just their own point of view, but they can value different geography, different culture, different religion, because a lot of the work today at complicated levels involves people from many countries, many different backgrounds. And what he said was, those people are hard to find. You can find people with good test scores. Those people aren't hard to find. But empathy. And I was fascinated by that. because I'll just have to tell you, my country, we don't do such a good job, as you can imagine. And he said that. He was very clear that Americans aren't very good at that. We look out at the world, and if it doesn't look like our version of democracy, we think it's broken. So we have a long way to go. I think Australia is probably closer than we are. But I just thought I would combine some things, spend a little bit of time talking about empathy, show you what I think it looks like. And then I loved what Stephen said, where's your student's best work? And where's your best work? So I want to look at that. I want to look at where are students' best work. I just love that idea. And then I want to talk about some change in the culture. So if we added all this up, empathy, critical thinking on the internet, and students being much more empowered than they've ever been, producing work beyond anything we've ever seen, what kind of learning environment would we have to build to support that? So is that okay? And then I asked some people I know, I've been here before and visited some of your schools. So I asked people, how far could I go on a scale of 1 to 10? And they said 11. So with your permission, I'll push it. Is that okay? Well, I'm not going to worry about your feelings. Is that all right? Is it? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. So off we go. So if you could pop me up, my screen on screen. All right, so 2 weeks ago, I was in the United States working with top students, secondary top students. And I enjoy challenging students. First thing I'll say to students, do you know how to use Google? Every student I've ever met says they know how to use Google. In fact, they laugh at me for asking the question. I'll say, okay, well, give me some kind of research you had to do for school this year. I want to see how you use Google. And so the boy I was talking to, top student, says, well, I had to research the Iranian hostage crisis. And he types in Iranian hostage crisis. And I knew we were in trouble right away. So I said, well, look at the results. And he's looking, and I'd like you to look at the results too. And I asked him, what's wrong with that result list? What's wrong with the search? What's wrong with the search? It's all Western sources. There isn't one source from Iran. There's not one. And I have to tell you, the Iranian point of view is slightly different than the U.S. point of view on what happened. I mean, they have a different historic perspective, cultural perspective, religious. They got a lot of different perspectives. And so I said to the student, you might want to do this when you, and maybe your kids know, I don't know. And I said to this student, I'd like you to redo the search and only get Iranian results. And he couldn't do it. He just didn't know how to do it. And I thought, uh-oh, he thinks he knows how to use Google. He doesn't know he doesn't know. I'm deeply concerned that the majority of the students I meet anywhere in the world don't know they don't know. They think they know. There's an amazing false sense of security on the part of children around their ability to use technology. I think they know what button to push. And I think they're not afraid of it. But their critical thinking, the depth, is missing. That's my observation. And I think educators are fooled too. Forgive me. Remember, we're going to go to an 11. I think educators are fooled because kids look like they're having such a good time, and they're able to learn it so fast that they must have this depth of being able to use it well, but I don't think that's true. So I'll just show you what I taught him. So I said, look, the first thing you should have been taught when you were in elementary school are different reference sites on the internet, just like that's a dictionary and that's a thesaurus. When you read books, we teach children those are references. Well, there's references on the internet you need to use all the time, of course, right? And so I said, look, we're going to type in internet and country code, and let me just show you the first step is to find the two-letter country code for Iran. And Iran is IR. And he didn't know this. He didn't know. He was 18 years old. Somehow he had made it through school without even understanding the design of web addresses. This is like not knowing what a table of contents is with a book. He just didn't understand. And I said, okay, well, we got the two-letter country code. You let me know if I'm boring you, okay? Because that'd be terrible. I don't want to bore you. If you know, everybody knows this probably, but site colon, IR, and then here, just to show you. So I had to show him the operator. Google has certain words that are reserved as operators. You probably know this. Site is one of the more commonly used operators that limits your result to one extension. Here, I'll show you in a moment. So then he types in Iranian hostage crisis. I said, wait. The Iranians don't call it the Iranian hostage crisis. Shh, stop. Think. You know, it's not about technology, it's about thinking, about perspective, like the guy at HSBC. You know, you got to think. And I suggested it might be called the American hostage crisis. He wasn't thinking. And so we type in the American hostage crisis, right? Whoop. And off we go. We only get Iranian results. Everything's an IR. Do you see? .ir. And the boy, there were three things he wasn't able to do. Just in this one problem. One, he didn't understand the architecture of web addresses. He had never even understood how to decode a web address. And if you don't know how to decode a web address, you can't read. You're illiterate. Then he didn't understand the indexing tool of Google, Site Command. He didn't understand what an operator is as a concept. And number three, he didn't think from another perspective, the Iranian hostage crisis. So we were going down fast, in my opinion, and I had to point this out to him and all the teachers in the room who are watching it. This is live in front of a group about this size. And I said, look, you're going to college, you're going to go to university, and it's a complicated world out there. And you have to know critical thinking on the internet. And he said, what other tricks do you have? I mean, the kid said, when you take an 18-year-old who thinks they know everything, and you start to peel back their ignorance and hold up the mirror and show them, as long as they're willing to learn, they'll say, okay, what else do I need to know? Any observations or questions so far? Or we're okay? Just a little warm-up. Okay. How many of you are on the internet right now? Just out of curiosity, you have a device in front of you? It's not as many as... You were paper trained, weren't you? You brought paper. That's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. It's... Okay. It's not a fair fight. Okay. I'm going to suggest that a lot of technology we use in school is a distraction to learning. I worry about that. PowerPoint and other, even Web 2.0 tools. You take away the technology and you look at the content, and a lot of what's on the internet and the web, we could have put on 6 3x5 cards. You know, it's, so as leaders, this is expensive stuff. It's very expensive. And the cost is in training the teachers. The real cost isn't even in buying the device. Today, I can only imagine what today cost in terms of what you make in one day. This room. You add up the daily rate of your salaries and multiply this times the number of people in this room. This is an expensive day. Fair enough? This is a very expensive day. And then there's a lot more after this. So we got to figure out, if we're going to spend that much money, what really pays off? What's the real payoff if you can only do a few things well? What's your investment strategy? I'm convinced, so this is going to sound a little wacky, but I'm convinced the real revolution's not technology, it's information. That the only reason you have a laptop or a cell phone is to get information or global communication. There's two things you can do with these devices. Access information, manipulate it, build it, create it, publish it, or talk to somebody. Two things. And I think these devices are going to change over the next 10 years. I think change is coming. Serious change. I don't think we're going to have laptops. I think we're going to have a little device in our pocket. I don't think it matters whether your school is going to be on the internet or not. Every device will be on the internet. So your children, the world I think they're going to enter, they're going to have the internet all the time. Would you be willing to accept that premise that it doesn't matter, the outside world is not filtered, those children are on the internet. In fact, we got schools in my country who prevent cell phones, and kids, as soon as they leave school, they turn them back on. And they're back up and running. So, in fact, in many ways, school in my country is the only place where you're not on the internet all the time. It's the only place. The rest of the world, as long as you can afford it, you're on the internet. So if I were in your position, and I've seen lots of schools, and I think the first decision I would make is teaching critical thinking on the internet. I would want my children to be literate, have a literacy in this medium where they can tear apart and know whether something is true or false. True or false. Here, let me give you can I give you one more problem, like the Iranian hostage crisis? You're never going to say no to me, are you? Too polite. You're just too polite. Okay, so I'm going to type in ear mouse, and I'm going to show you an image of a weird-looking mouse. I can usually capture kids' attention right away with this photograph. Can you all see that? There's a mouse. This is the BBC. First sentence reads, scientists who grew a human ear on the back of a mouse. And then if you compare that, if I type in ear mouse, usually you get Wikipedia towards the top. You'd be surprised. A lot of kids don't even know why that. I'll ask kids, why is that at the top? And they'll say, most visits, the most hits, recently added content, the most people building it. And I'll have to say, no, 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 that's not it. Anyway, if I click on the Wikipedia article, a laboratory mouse that had what looked like a human ear. The ear was actually ear-shaped cartilage. It didn't grow in the back. According to Wikipedia, we have two versions. We have the BBC version, and we have the Wikipedia version. At your table, I think this would be an interesting conversation. I'm going to hand over to you now. I'd like you to share with your colleagues. I've just shown you that there's two versions of how the ear got on the back of the mouse. BBC, it genetically grew in the back of the mouse. Wikipedia, it was sewn in the back of the mouse. What would your strategy be for determining which one is true? And let me just suggest that everyone says get a third source. Which third source? So at your table, say hi again. I'll give you 2-3 minutes. What's your strategy? I've asked kids this, and you can get a third source to support either version. By the way, I'm just going to tell you up front that Wikipedia is correct on every factual point, and the BBC is incorrect. That alone surprises a lot of adults who grew up with the BBC as a reliable, trusted source for news, who also think that Wikipedia should be untrusted. It usually startles people, but in this world, it's important to keep an open mind. What used to be true might not be true anymore. What you think is not true might be true. And so you have to be really, really careful. Prior experience, you know the quote, the famous quote, your prior experience is your worst enemy. You know that quote? I forget who said it. You can probably look that up on the internet. Let me know who said that. Nesbitt or somebody. Anyway, so what I do, maybe I'll show you what I do. Let's see, where are we? Wikipedia. So I read, and at University of Massachusetts, MIT, my general strategy is to find the primary source. I don't want another article. I don't want another magazine. I don't want the encyclopedia. I don't want a third party, which the BBC is not a primary source. Wikipedia is not a primary source. Just that concept eludes a lot of students. What's a primary source? So you got to have a framework of thinking, I think. Primary source. All right. So I really want to talk to the mouse. What happened to you? But the mouse won't talk to me. So what's the primary source? The primary source is the lab. Where was this done? Where is the lab, and what does the lab say? That's what I want. Is that fair? It's my strategy. By the way, I've watched teachers do this. And I think I understand what happened in when you have a school library, and that's what you grew up with, there's hardly any primary sources in a school library. Almost everything is a secondary source. And so teachers have been used to, almost their whole life, not having access to primary sources. They just never had it. Well, the internet, you have access to primary sources. So now we have to teach teachers to unlearn where they ordinarily would go for information and rethink a deeper level. All right, so MIT, University of Massachusetts, I don't know, but what I'm going to do, what I did, in fact, is I'll go to Google, and I'll, step 1, site, MIT.edu. That's the extension of MIT. And both articles agree that it's called vacanti, and it's an ear, and it's a mouse. And now, these 2,000 results, I have limited my results only to MIT, where one of the researchers happens to work. And from there, I can get right to the Vacanti lab, the original source, and Wikipedia is correct, and the BBC is wrong. Are we okay? I'm boring you, aren't I? Well, in Australia, I think thinking looks like being bored. Because it's that glassy-eyed look, and I'm not playing poker with anybody in this room. I'm not playing. So I could go on and on. But let's just say that we can teach critical thinking on the internet. We can teach children and adults how to tear apart the layers of information on the internet. If I were only going to do one thing, that's the one thing I'd do in schools. Teach children to read the internet and be phenomenally good researchers. I'll come back to this if we have time, but unless are there any questions in the room that you want to give me a problem to solve or ask a mechanical question, or we're okay? No one in this room. I was the technology director in the high school where Ferris Bueller's Day Off was made. I was. I'm used to people not raising their hand. That's okay. I could talk if nobody was here. It would be okay. I'm going to give you another problem. I used to teach math. I think I mentioned that. And one of my favorite tools on the internet is Wolfram Alpha. It's not a search engine, it's a knowledge engine. A search engine finds you stuff that exists, like that photograph. A knowledge engine solves problems for you. Very different. Solves problems. So in Wolfram Alpha, and it will do all kinds of problems. Let me just hit example just to show you. How many of you have used Wolfram Alpha? I just need a sense. Whoa, whoa. Okay, I'm about to tell you something outrageous. This could be the single most important tool to teach students how to use in school. I don't think 6 people in the room have seen this or use it. Okay, this is my opinion. Okay, so we go to examples. You can type in Catholicism. It's really fascinating. I can solve all kinds of problems. That's just categories of the kinds of problems I can solve with Wolfram Alpha. And it's an app for a cell phone and the iPad and the rest of it. So we'll start simple. Very simple. 6x squared plus 2 equals 8. Just a standard equation. Takes the equation, shows me the graph, shows me the answers, and then if I need to, I can type in solution. Don't forget solution. And I type in solution, it does it again, but over here it has show steps. And I click on show steps, and it breaks that equation down step by step by step. I can do this with any equation in the curriculum, from 1 and 1 is 2 to taking integrals in calculus. I'm guessing you don't use this in your school. I'll take a wild guess. All right, let me just show you another kind of problem. All right, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but I hear some groans. I don't know why you're groaning, but let's say I want to know the difference between a hot dog and a hamburger. Hot dog, hamburger. I want to know which one is more nutritious. So I type in hot dog, hamburger. And in a moment, it's going to give me a breakdown of more data than I want about hot dogs and hamburgers than I have ever had. And if you understand how to read those numbers hot dog's a lot healthier than a hamburger, which stunned me. I would have gone with a hamburger. But I've never had this breakdown, right? And so at some point, you got to ask, well, where does that information come from? That's not a website. Do you understand that was generated on the fly? That doesn't exist as a page. It's real time. All right, so just show you where that comes from. There's source information at the bottom. I click source information, and it came from all those sources. You know how long it would have taken me to read all those sources and organize all that data in a chart? That would have taken me days. Wolfram Alpha. Type in Catholicism. See what you get. All right. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem. The problem is, I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's going to sound really arrogant. I have sat with teachers and said, give me your assignments. And I can usually get the assignment done within a couple seconds. I just copy and paste it. Is that, you ask me a question, I can probably find the answer. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I can find the answer. Do you believe me? I mean, all right. So here's the problem. So I was at a school. I had breakfast with kids. I always do that now. I've learned the hard way. Before I talk to teachers, I always ask the kids, what's going on in this school? How to use Facebook for learning. And I learn all kinds of stuff about what's really going on in school. You should do that, by the way. All right, so the kids did not know about Wolfram Alpha. And I showed them Wolfram Alpha, and their mouths dropped open, and these are top-level kids in calculus in my country who had just taken our advanced placement exam, and they were furious. They were taking notes in class, you know? And these kids cared about learning, and they didn't know about, the math teacher didn't tell them. Well, I went around school that day, and in the day, the head of the school comes to me and says, we have a small problem. The math department wants to meet with you. And that's right. I went, uh-oh. So I went over to the math department, and the math head said, what right do you have coming to this school telling our kids how to cheat on every homework assignment we give? Because we had a meeting, and we've decided that the majority of our students are going to now, because it went on Facebook and every kid in this school knows, not just the kids you had for breakfast, but the whole school knows, and that's because of you. And you've just destroyed mathematics at this school. Because kids will copy, they won't learn math, they're going to hand in their homework, they're going to get an A on every homework assignment, and it's a disaster. You've created a disaster. And I said, well, let's get some kids and ask them. So we got some kids, and the kids came in, and I told the story, copy, concern. I said, what are you going to do to the kids? The first kid said, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy and hand in my homework. And my heart sank, but I asked the kid, I said, well, how is that different from what you do now? And the kid said, oh, that's hugely different. Now I'm copying the right answer. Not that kids would ever copy. Okay, so you're leaders. What would you do if a guy like me shows up and every kid discovers they're going to discover it eventually. Can we agree to this? It's not my fault. I don't think it's my fault. Somehow I don't think it's my fault. Blame Stephen Wolfram, the mathematician who invented this. Don't blame me. But I am slightly curious, at your table, since this could happen in your school, what are you going to tell the math department? Say hi to your neighbor again. Is there anybody willing to share what their neighbor said? It won't even be you. It's not even you. It's going to be what your neighbor said. Anybody willing? Yes, way at the back. Could you speak up a little bit?
To take the answer and then apply it for a student who was having difficulty, and
Yes.
then go back and rewrite the instructions for someone who might have difficulty with a math problem.
That's right.
How could you put it into language that they'd understand?
That's right.
No.
That's right. No, absolutely. That's a great idea. Any other creative idea? That was a very creative idea. That's the only one in the room? That's fine. All right, well, maybe I'll demonstrate what I told the math department. That's a curtain. That's all it is a curtain. That was taken by a trigonometry student with her cell phone in her house. That curtain, according to the overlays I'll show you in a moment, has about 12 geometric representations of trigonometry. From sine curve to the arc of pi. This curtain, see if I scroll over it, I'll have to zoom in. But if I scroll over it, and you can't read that, but just trust me, those are all explanations in trigonometry. Well, I actually think it's easier to teach kids to memorize how to solve trig functions, the traditional definition of a math class, solve these problems, than going out with your cell phone and taking pictures of the world and describing the application of trigonometry. So in an age of Wolfram Alpha, you would rise to higher levels of application of knowledge. That's what I think we need to do. I think we need to get to the application level across the curriculum. Well, now we're in trouble in my country because, frankly, all of our math teachers can't do that. They're so used to knowing the answer for every problem they've ever given in class that I've watched people, the day you suggest that kids should go out in the world and start bringing problems back to class from the world in mathematics, you got a bunch of people who say, oh no, that's not going to happen. And what they really don't know their stuff. Teachers who know their stuff go crazy. They can't wait to do this. So I think we've got a problem. Has nothing to do with technology, has to do with knowing your stuff. And is that okay to say? I don't know. Any other comment? I mean, you can criticize me anytime. By the way, I'm making everything up. I mean, I'm just making it up. No one's taught me these things. I just travel around and observe and decide what to tell you. So I'm just making it up. I hope it's good enough to criticize. And you shouldn't let me get away with saying anything. Yeah, yes, sir. Homework? Oh, that's over. Homework, as we know it, here, let me show you why homework is over. Whoever invented homework did not understand how the brain works. Let me give you, this guy is Eric Mazur. Eric Mazur is the Dean of Applied Physics at Harvard. He has very high expectations, and he knows his stuff. So, have any of you seen Eric Mazur? Just a couple of you? Let me play a little bit of this. I'm going to suggest, because I don't have a lot of time, when you go home, you can go to YouTube, maybe not at your school, but outside, and
physics at Harvard. Over the years, he discovered that students in his introductory physics course were passing exams without having understood the fundamental concepts he was trying to teach.
Well, do you believe that? Let's just stop there. Is it possible, you understand what Harvard is? kind of a competitive place to get in. All right. And so you basically have to have perfect test scores to get into Harvard. Perfect. And they take 6% of the students. I mean, even at that level. So you got some kids who know, you know what? I don't know how to say this in a nice way. I think there's two kinds of basic skills in school. One is you're really, really good at being taught. The other is you're really, really good at learning how to learn. Being taught and learning how to learn are not the same thing. Being taught is a much more passive regurgitation, transfer of knowledge that you're supposed to receive without doing a lot of work, other than problems that are structured for you. In other words, we spoon feed transfer of knowledge. That's being taught. Learning how to learn is going out in the world and finding your own problems and trying to figure out how to apply knowledge. That's completely different. You know, I don't know if Stephen's still in the room, whether he would agree with this or not, but I think schools were designed to teach you how to be taught, not necessarily to learn how to learn. That's the biggest indictment I can claim on the design of school we've inherited. So let me show you what Missouri did to completely redesign. By the way, at Harvard and other elite universities in the United States, the data is showing that only about 20% of students who do really, really well actually can apply the knowledge. It's a ridiculously low number. Well, if that's true, then what's the point of getting a high test score? What's the point if you don't know how to apply it? Is my attitude okay? Well, I think I'm losing friends if I made any. I think I am. But let's go.
In response to this problem, Professor Mazur developed a variety of interactive techniques linked to each other in ways that help his students learn basic concepts far better than before. Requiring students to read, think, and reflect before the lecture is the first step in Professor Mazur's
Okay. One of the first things he did when he found out it was only 20%, kind of freaked him out. He studies the brain. What we know, we don't know very much, but we know a couple things. One of the things we know about the brain is you can't turn it off. It's always learning. There's no off button. And the brain is a biochemical, electrical thing, and it's always sending out pathways. And if you don't know if you're right or wrong, you will learn whatever it is. So if you're at home doing homework and it's incorrect, and you don't get feedback within 400 milliseconds, this is one of the few facts in this presentation. No, honest to God, it's almost all opinion, but this is a fact, 400 milliseconds. So, if you're learning something, and I don't tell you how well you did until the next day, I have messed you up. I've literally created an environment that messes up your brain. You need 400 milliseconds right away. In fact, the great quote, practice does not make perfect, practice makes permanent. So yes, homework as we know it should go away as fast as possible. So let me show you what you see here. Mazur, if you saw the movie The Social Network, Mark Zuckerberg was a student in Mazur's physics class before Facebook. Mazur invented Facebook, not Zuckerberg, not the Twinkle Winkle twins. It was Mazur. And the reason Mazur invented Facebook is the same thing I'm experiencing in this room. We've had 2 people raise their hand in this room. And I know that, and you know that. The physical proximity is shutting a lot of you down from taking a risk of asking a question. Because you don't want to appear ignorant in front of your peers. I'm guessing that's part of it. Harvard, same thing. So one of the most critical ideas in teaching and learning is to make thinking visible. How do we get into the mind of children? How do we help teachers see inside so we understand what is going on within the mind of a child? And by looking at you, I can't tell. But Mazur figured out that if you build an online community, you can get 100% of the students asking questions. That's what we want. We want 100% of the students asking questions. So homework becomes asking questions instead of solving problems. We just reverse it. Little concept, no rocket science here. Won't even cost you a lot of money. Actually, it's free. It's actually free. Now, you show me a teacher who understands the questions of every student and the confusion and the misconceptions, and then you show me a teacher who doesn't, and I'm going to bet on only one of those teachers to get those kids to the highest levels of achievement. The teacher who understands every student's questions is an unfair fight. By the way, Mazur has 3,000 questions that he's been databasing. He's been pulling off over the years, 3,000, and they're tagged, databased, and they're linked to the kind of problem to solve. Oh my gosh, he has information. In fact, I'm looking for the second teacher on the planet who has saved all their students' questions and databased them and studied them. Because not only is homework dead as we know it, but lesson plans should also go away. There's two things we need to overhaul: homework and lesson plans. See, right now, lesson plans are based on the teacher's knowledge of one line through the curriculum, regardless of whether the kids, in fact, in the United States, we call that covering the curriculum. It has nothing to do with mastery. It has to do with, I got to get from this day to that day, and I got to cover all that stuff, and I do it with lesson plans. That's an ancient idea. I have enough information today that I can design a unique lesson plan for every learner, not one for the class. What's that? One for the class? That's a compromise. Can we agree? I mean, if anybody in this room thinks that a teacher's lesson plan is designed for every student in the class, you're going to have to explain that to me. I just don't understand that. All right, so we'll keep going.
Process. He also uses the course website to monitor their learning and communicate with his students.
I don't go into the classroom lecturing on what I think they need. No, they tell me what it is that they want me.
All right, so basically what Mazur does is his lesson plans are based on the pattern of questions his students are asking. That's very different than how most teachers plan lessons. So he looks at the questions, he says, all right, I better give them a problem in acceleration and calculus. They don't see the difference between zero acceleration because the object is going at 60 miles an hour and so forth. In fact, I'm going to do it to you now, if I may. Give you an experience like this. Then he makes things more complicated, which I will try, and with your I hope you're willing to play the game. Here, I'm going to go to Poll Everywhere. I'm going to ask you a question. I hope some of you have a cell phone or a laptop, because I'm going to ask you to vote right now on an answer. This is what Mazur does. All the students are connected, and I'm going to ask you to vote. The problem is, which of 4 subsystems contributes the most mass to wood? So is it the sun, water, air. So for those of you on the web, please type in that web address, polev.acis, and you'll see, vote for one of those. If you're on a cell phone, and I didn't try this yet, I set it to an Australian, does that look like Australia to you? Yeah? Okay. So use your cell phone. That's the number. And then text in, if you're using a cell phone, text the corresponding number. So let me explain the question one more time. There are 4 subsystems in photosynthesis. Fair? All good. One of those subsystems contributes the most molecules to the growth of a tree. The actual fiber of the tree comes from one of those 4 things. Which one? So if you don't mind, do any of you see this on the web? We're not getting any votes. This is the most unusual room I've had. Maybe it's not working in here. Is it slow? It's just, whoa, there we go. Okay. All right, go boom. So the room's voting, and we'll see how it goes. Now, ordinarily, if you were in my class, I'm not showing you the results like this because you might be influenced by looking at an earlier answer. But you're educators, so I want you to see what I see. Try not to be influenced by the answers. Make your own. And I've set it so you can only vote once. No re-voting. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to shut you down, okay? Well, maybe I'll let it go for a little while. Okay. All right, so while you're still voting, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor and discuss this. But first, I'm going to give you a more complicated picture. Scientists tell us that the rainforest is critical to the survival of the planet because something is going on between all those trees in the rainforest and the atmosphere. There's something happening that is helping the planet moderate temperature leading to climate. I bet everybody in the room knows that the rainforests are critical. I bet everybody in the room knows the dominant molecule of oil. And I bet everybody in the room knows where oil comes from, the original source for oil. I bet you understand the dynamic of the rainforest. You understand the molecules of oil, dominant molecule of oil, where oil comes from. So if you don't mind, this is what Mazur does. I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor and defend your answer and question your neighbor. But some of you don't get too emotionally attached to your question because at best the room did 41%. You flunked. Everybody took photosynthesis. But this is the problem. All right, so if you don't mind, turn to your neighbor, rethink your answer, discussing these 3 other qualities I've added to the mix. Okay, you can re-vote. You can vote again now. For those of you on a laptop, you may need to refresh your screen. Hit a refresh, get back to the website again. If you're on a cell phone, you can vote. Type in the number, same number, 61. The numbers of answers may be different, so you want to hit the corresponding number. And let's see if there's any difference in the answer pattern. Okay. I'll let it go. I think the data's in to be statistically accurate for the room. Just to let you know, 69 people have voted. That's more than raised their hands. This is good. The answer is air. The answer is air. And I've had problems. People have told me that's not right. But I'll just tell you, carbon dioxide is in the air. Plants are breathing all the time. And they let out oxygen. Did you know that? They take in do you believe that? They take in and they let out oxygen? All right, so if they let out oxygen and they take in carbon dioxide, where's the carbon? Where's the carbon? It's in the plant. It's in the plant. And if the sun doesn't have any material, let's agree to that. It can't be the sun. And it could be water. We'll get to that in a moment. If it was the soil and you have a ton of mass in a tree, then that tree should have sunk. Because it took up so much material, there'd be a big hole in the ground. But there isn't a big hole in the ground. There's no hole in the ground. So where'd all that material come from? It came from the air. Does anybody believe me? 50% of you do. Okay. Now, the first answer was 14%. Did you remember that? For air. Without my telling you, half the room figures it out on your own by making the problem more complicated. Now, I want to show you a movie of Harvard students being interviewed. This isn't going to bode well on Harvard University. Just to let you know, let me, and I'll do this very quickly because I want to get to some other concepts.
Here's a seed.
Okay.
Okay. Now hold on to that for a second.
Okay.
Imagine that I planted that in the ground.
Okay.
And a tree grew. All right. And here is a piece of that tree.
Sure.
Okay. Now, where did all that stuff come from?
Well, you mean where did the mass come from? The added mass that this is now a much larger, heavier tree, and this is a very small seed. The mass came from a lot of things, I'd guess. I'd guess from water.
He's wrong. He's wrong, and I'll just tell you, he's wrong, she's wrong, she's wrong. They're just all wrong. It's just all wrong. And then the most interesting part of this movie, they tell them the answer. They just tell them. And I'm intrigued by their response. I want to just play the last girl.
What would you say to someone who told you that the weight of the tree came mostly from the carbon dioxide in the air?
I would say that's very disturbing.
Yep, very disturbing. I mean, that has to be the penultimate definition of arrogance. You get a Harvard diploma, and 5 minutes later, you're denying photosynthesis. All right, so of all the problems, and everybody, we can all point out problems, but of all the problems, I would like to point out, it's that we don't teach kids to think things through. We just tell them an answer, and they're supposed to memorize it and give it back to us on a test. You add technology to that culture, save your money. Don't buy a single laptop. Don't spend a dime. It isn't going to help you. Because the real problem is not a technology problem. The real problem is a learning design problem. Technology is not a magic bullet. You teach every kid to use it. I don't care what it is. iPad, laptop, cell phone, I don't care what it is. That will not do you any good. I will make that claim. I've read the reports. But you change pedagogy. You change the way people learn, the kinds of problems they solve, then you can get breakthrough. You do need technology, because there's no way to keep track of 3,000 questions. It's too much information to manage. So we need fantastic information management tools like Missouri has built. And, you know, I wish I could tell you, just give every kid a laptop, train them how to use it, and you're good to go. That's not true. Much more complicated. I think this is a 3 to 5 year. If you were focused, if you were totally committed and focused to studying cognitive science, we can do a little bit more, studying pedagogy, studying the kinds of problems we can give kids across the curriculum. If you were totally focused, I think it's 3 to 5 years anyway. Here, let me give you a simple example of change in culture. On my last trip, I was up in Brisbane, and I showed kids this website. This is the only website I know in the world where every problem in a curriculum in a year has been designed by children to teach other children. Happens to be a 6th grade math class outside Los Angeles. So if I click prime numbers and I want to learn about prime numbers, by the way, I just want to point out that's been viewed 24,000 times. Real numbers. The second fact in my presentation. Real number, and so I click on this just to see. My teacher tells me we're going to do prime numbers next week.
Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm going to show you how to do prime factorization. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a factor tree. A factor tree is you take a number, such as the number 32, and you break it up into its prime factors. So 32, we're going to break it up into the numbers 2 and 16. So we're going to try to get it down to all prime numbers. A prime number is when a number is only divisible by 1 in itself. 32 is composite, meaning that it is divisible by...
All right, so in the interest of time, if you just want to be told the answer, it's 2 to the 5th. So it's 2 to the 5th. I want to go to the end of the tutorial.
N is 2 to the
She does it twice.
Power, which is the same answer as we got for the other problem. So this is the prime factorization of the number 32. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Bob, and goodbye.
So I showed this to some kids in Brisbane, and I said, what do you think? And a little boy, about her age, was sitting next to his teacher. And the boy says, I prefer to learn like that. And I said, why? And he says, my teacher doesn't have a rewind button. And I said, what does that mean to you? And the boy said, well, my teacher knows too much. And I thought, well, aren't teachers supposed to know? And I said, what do you mean, your teacher? Don't you want a teacher who knows a lot? And the boy said, my teacher knows too much, and he explains it as if you're supposed to understand it the first time. And I don't. That's a lesson plan, right? And so I showed him, and then I watch kids. I just watch, and they start on their own looking at other kids' tutorials. I've had kids in workshops I've done with teachers and kids. It's going to sound totally unrealistic. Spend hours on this website watching tutorials by children in mathematics. They wouldn't ask their teacher for help in a classroom. The research John Hattie has done, right? You borrowed this guy from New Zealand. You put him in Melbourne. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Well, it turns out that Hattie's research is very interesting, and peer tutoring is high on the list. It turns out that when you study children, they're social. Kids want to be with other kids. Did you know? They're social. And not only do kids want to be with other kids, but learning is social. Kids prefer to learn from other kids. Now, I don't mean to insult all the teachers in the room, but it's not personal. It's just a developmental issue. Children feel safer asking a friend for help than a teacher. It's nothing personal. Well, if you believe that, if you buy into research, and we shouldn't just wing it, and if you buy into it, and I happen to like research, then one of the things I would do if I were going, I used to be principal of a school. I go back and I become head of a school. I'm going to challenge every teacher to empower children to create tutorials in every subject we teach. And I bet we've underestimated kids contributing their knowledge and how they see things to help other children learn. It's not sufficient to help teachers become better teachers. That is not sufficient. You will never get there. The only way I know how to improve a school is that every kid becomes a teacher. Every single child is empowered under the direction of a teacher to create content to help other children learn. Here, and just to show you, you know, if I were just to go to this website, and I'm going to suggest that the biggest barrier to moving forward with all these powerful tools that we have isn't a technical problem. It isn't even money. The real problem is a shift of control. The real problem is we have to take people who've always been in control of managing classes. Rubrics, assessment, curriculum, assignments, almost everything is controlled by the teacher. Almost everything. And now what we have to do is we have to study developmental psychology and cognitive science, and we have to agree that a community-based approach to learning, where the children are helping one another all the time, is a more powerful model than only making the teacher a better teacher. And just to show you, if I click on the cluster map, this site in Los Angeles has cluster map. So while I've been here, you know, from 12:20 to in the last 17 minutes, all those sites have come on to that website in California. Have you ever talked to a 6-year-old? I can show you a first grade site in a moment that looks like this. Have you ever talked to a kid who has had more than 100 countries see their stuff, and they know it? They know that their work is being, Stephen used the word celebration. I'm sure he did, yes? He used the word celebration. Okay, I agree with Stephen. I think we should be celebrating student work, not only in our schools, around the world. Because the day that you decide as a leader that every single one of your classrooms should be global, and that we should be teaching children to publish to the world, see, an audience of one is no longer sufficient. Most work only goes to one person, the teacher. That's in an internet world, not sufficient. This is more motivating. Kids will work for hours designing tutorials because they know that the whole world is counting on them, and then the teacher, of course, approves it and makes sure that those tutorials are good. Here, let me show you, if I may, first grade. I have 2 minutes. I go really, really fast. Kathy Cassidy. You can all do this later. Kathy Cassidy. She's a first grade teacher in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Kathy Cassidy. So, Kathy Cassidy's blog looks like this. The pheasant eggs hatched in Moose Jaw on May 25th. 8,000 people have already seen that. Most first grade teachers don't have the capacity to get 8,000 people to see student work. She's an unusually globally connected teacher. If I'm starting a new school, I want every teacher globally connected. That goes back to empathy. And if you look at this website, it's videos of children sharing their work. Those were the eggs earlier this week. Children are sharing mathematics and reading and videos and science in their backyard. And oh my gosh, this website, these children are being taught not only the content, but how to share their world with the world, share their work with the world, like drawing like Van Gogh. So to sum up, real revolution's not about technology, it's about information. But in order to get the right information to the right people, teachers who have databases of questions, children who have access to how other children explain things, a teacher who celebrates student work every day for the whole world, we're going to need brave, courageous leaders who I know are in this room, who are going to be able to help your colleagues embrace the concept that we've underestimated children's creativity and willingness to contribute if they were only given that chance. And the biggest barrier is letting go of control. Because why would you let go without having experienced this other kind of culture? It would be a huge risk. It would be natural behavior not to let go. So with that, I hope it was good enough to criticize. Thanks for letting me hang out with you guys. All good.